gambling has become a strategy for survival, a desperate attempt to beat poverty, joblessness, and hunger.
It's absolutely evil. Another aspect to how people get hooked is that for a lot of middle-aged women, gaming and gambling, but at least gaming, they're not going to lose everything they have. It's a way of self-soothing for women who are under tremendous stress at home or at work or both.
This episode was brought to you by 91.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Readiness Report. It's Redi Tlhabi. I am in Washington. I'm having a conversation with you about something that really just stopped my heart. I am not a gambler. I don't like gambling at all. And I live with this notion that I could never win anything. That's why I don't even take part in competitions and raffles. To get me to even buy a ticket, a church ticket raffle, whatever you call it, I'll buy it because it's for a good cause, but I buy it knowing that I'm not going to win. I just don't live with that mentality. So much so that if my number is called out, I'll be the last person to find out. I just sit there and do nothing because I don't expect to win. So I come with a particular attitude towards gambling and competitions and all of that. Last week, I was minding my own business on social media, and then I saw some staggering figures that gambling is not just a pastime for so many people in South Africa, but that it's becoming one of South Africa's biggest social and economic crises. That it's no longer just weekend fun or quick lotto ticket. For millions of South Africans, gambling has become a strategy for survival, a desperate attempt to beat poverty, joblessness, and hunger. So I did a little bit of homework. According to the National Gambling Board, guys, gambling turnover surpassed 1.5 trillion rands, the highest ever recorded. And a recent study found that more than half of South Africans, gamble, with around 27% of social grant recipients using part of their grants to bet. We can nitpick about the figures. Are they correct? Are they not? I don't know. I'm just sharing what I found when I did my research. But regardless of the nitty-gritties, it is very clear that we are dealing with a scourge that is about what? Addiction, clever marketing, or despair among so many South Africans. And I just want to unpack this with South Africa's foremost consumer journalist and editor. She's the go-to person if you've got any questions about consumer-related matters in South Africa. Wendy Knowler, it's such a joy to have you on the Readiness Report. Welcome.
Hello, Redi. So lovely to be talking to you on the airways again. It's a very long time since we spoke to each other when you were on 702, and now I've got my little weekly slot. Funny old life.
Yeah. I mean, we used to abuse you on, I think we had the consumer corner or something, and you really were our go-to person, and you still are. I'm so thrilled to see you still doing what I would call country duty, educating millions of people. Am I right to be disturbed about this? It was just frightening to see these figures on social media. What's going on?
I think that those figures were prompted by the latest gambling board figures being released, where it's got to 1.5 trillion, as you said. It's about a 550% increase over something like 4 years. I delved into those figures about a month ago, Redi, when I got an email. Well, it was not specifically to me. I was copied on an email that this woman sent to the gambling board, to Lotto Star, to all the authorities she could think of, and then she copied it to me, the only journalist. And essentially, it gave me huge pause because she was kind of me. She had maybe years ago finding herself in a physical casino for some other reason, and an entertainment, a concert or something, gambled for maybe 50 rand, walked away. That was it. And she was finding this onslaught of advertising, in every sphere of our life in South Africa. The radio ads, you arrive at airports, Durban, King Shaka Airport in Durban. It's just a blaze from top to bottom of blue advertising for a gambling company. It's like a takeover, right? Anyway, she said, like me, that used to irritate her. But then one day she was driving to work and she heard this quiz on the radio, her favorite radio station, and she'd like to enter it. But if you had registered with Lotto Star, you would double your winnings. And so she went and did it with no intention of gambling, but because she had a mindset like you and I, right? But you got some free plays, slots. And so she started, and in 6 months, she lost 600,000. So from zero to, when I spoke to her, she was in a psychiatric facility. She had just actually the month before come out of debt review. She had got divorced. She'd lost a lot of money. She'd been retrenched, and she'd clawed her way back, paid back all her debts. And now she's back in debt review. But I think the one thing that's happened is online, right? We've always had gambling, but you had to go into a physical casino or whatever. And now it's so easy. It's at the tips of your fingers, and you've got privacy. This woman told me that she would be gambling even on Christmas Day in front of her family, but because every now and then you take a break, you're on your phone, your teens are on their phones, and so it's like normal behavior, right? And she'd be gambling. She'd take her phone to work. Well, obviously she'd take her phone to work. She'd take it to the loo when she went, and she'd lose. I mean, she was losing at one stage, 8,000 Rand a day, borrowing. And the end of the road came in July when she just literally couldn't borrow any more money. But it's that online thing, online gambling. And then, as you said, I mean, it's bad enough, someone like that who's, not on the poverty line. Well, she kind of is now, but she has means, she has support. But the unemployed and people using their grants. So there was a discussion on X that you were privy to, and I just want to read this because this says everyone's talking about the scourge or whatever, and this guy comes up, it could be a woman, nom de plume, and says, what are unemployed people supposed to do? Like, if I have 10 Rand, I'd rather risk making it 50 Rand, honestly. And I think that for me sums up the problem.
And in fact, you called it economic suicide. I just want you to read what you wrote in response to somebody, Koshik Karan, who was sharing some figures. And you said, economic suicide indeed. This trend horrifies and terrifies me. Millions of South Africans view gambling as a source of income, but the house always wins, always. If in doubt, take a look at the gambling industry's profits. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I just want to go to the psychology of the message that you've just read. For those of us who are responding with horror about this, I just want to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's getting a grant of 1,980, right? The Human Sciences Research Council shows that unemployment and inequality are the biggest predictors of gambling participation. You and I are not the ones who are unemployed. We're not the ones who are stuck in an unequal space. Somebody's getting 1,980 social grant. To you and I, go buy food, use it for transport. But to that person, from what you're saying in this research, a 50 Rand bet feels not like wastage or a risk, but it feels like an investment.
It does. It feels like a chance at something you couldn't otherwise have, and the advertising really plays into that psychology, right? I mean, it's relentless. You can't avoid it at all, and it's very much this is your chance, this is your hope, this is your give it a try, and it's all I think it's evil. I'm not going to mince my words, really. I think it's absolutely evil. The flip side of that, which I learned when I did, not the flip side, but another aspect to how people get hooked, is that for a lot of middle-aged women, gaming and gambling, but at least gaming, they're not going to lose everything they have. It's a way of self-soothing for women who are under tremendous stress at home or at work or both. For many women, there's a sandwich generation looking after parents and children. The woman that I featured in my story I told, very much fitted into that. It became a way to self-soothe. And for those of us who don't have that playing out in our lives, who don't have, any sort of mental health issues, it's hard to understand because, I mean, you'd think losing that amount of money is going to put you more in a stress situation. But there've been psychological studies around that as well. So this whole addiction thing, especially in a society as disparate as ours, has many different facets depending on where you are. But it is the group of people for whom they've had very little chance of real income, sustainable income, that are the most at risk because of that hope factor that these advertisers are playing on.
We're going to talk about the regulatory environment, accountability, especially in light of these huge profit margins. But I want to go back to something that you touched on, the online space, that it is now becoming an enabler, a dangerous space for so many people. I mean, we're living in an era of sophisticated algorithms and emotional triggers, a constant state of outrage or panic. I'm just thinking, if you are addicted to something and it just flashes unprovoked, unsolicited messaging, the word that I find most amusing. I mean, here, especially in the United States, also gambling is just huge. And then words like near miss, like, oh, if I don't act now, I'm going to miss out on something. Free bonus bets, just keeping people engaged. And it just makes me think, Wendy, we are talking here about behavioral, I can't say that word, behavioral engineering,
Yes.
engineering. Yeah. So many of these platforms are not regulated and people are at risk. What do we do?
I don't want to sound, as if there's no hope, but I think this thing is so entrenched now, and we haven't even got to kids in their school uniforms doing sports betting. One of the fathers said to me, they kid themselves that it's not just like buying a lotto ticket or doing slots, that there's an element of skill. They tell themselves it's they know the
I'm
team.
beating the system, and
Yes, that's exactly that. So they have a different compulsion. Meanwhile, they're just as addicted as anyone else, but just for a different reason. So I think, how do you turn that ship around, really? I don't know. Regulation is, you need to help people to help themselves, right? So I did a story last year when the previous figures came out, when it was 1.4 something trillion. I started reporting on this issue, and I found an article where a lot of UK banks allow people to impose their own bank blocks. In other words, they can't use any of their bank accounts to gamble. And they had terrific success with that. And so I asked all the banks at the time, about August last year, if any of them had this technology, was planning to do it. There was a no all round. And then when I did this story with this woman who lost 600K in 6 months, it was Standard Bank. And I went to them, and they said they're now looking at, that was one of the questions I asked, and they are now looking at allowing people to impose a block. And I said to this woman, would that have helped you? And she said, absolutely, for sure. Well, we don't really know if she would have had the discipline to not unban it. But she said things like, what she suggested was, when she only ever did slots, and that's common of middle-aged women, my research revealed. And she so that was the only thing, slots. And she said, when you win, you get the credits. There should be a hold of, say, a week to play them again, or a few days at least, because that would have stopped the pace of her losses. But she said you can immediately then play your winnings, because the house always wins. So yeah, there was something else that occurred to me that's gone out of my head. Hopefully it'll spring back again before we finish talking. But in terms of controls, and then of course from there's banks, and then there's regulatory control. So there was actually a story, front page lead in the Business Times, which I used to work for, just yesterday, and they spoke about what was happening legislatively. And there's, long story short, there've been several stalled attempts to get a gambling bill through, and it's now in the process. In the coming months, it should, we're at almost end of 2025, but it should be coming before Parliament again. I think the last time there was an attempt was 2018, And so much has changed since then. I mean, we didn't see online gambling like we are now. So I'm hoping there are enough people in civil society and in government who are seeing, like a few of us are, this for what it is, an absolute national crisis. All those gambling ads, all the giveaways, they're paid for by the people who's losing most of their social grants and by the woman the marketing manager who got hooked, on slots, and ordinary people who are being put in a terrible position. As you can tell, I feel really, really strongly about this because I can see the impact of it. I mean, in affordability studies now, they have to ask people. They should be, if they're not already asking, what are you spending on gambling? All the normal questions should stay there, but you need to be asking people, and what do you spend on gambling? Even if you're telling yourself it's recreational, it's taking up bigger and bigger chunks of people's take-home pay. It's or pension or grant or whatever the case may be.
I mean, I read a story of a young man in Soweto who lost his NSFAS stipend. From that, and I just want to stay a little bit with this issue of who benefits, the regulatory environment, embedding accountability into this, because this problem seems so structural. The state is, right, earning revenue from gambling taxes.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. And then a lot of companies who are in need of funds, and the normal source of revenue and sponsorship isn't there, of course, will grab. So the media, particularly radio, sports teams, we've seen it, sponsoring of school desks. One of the gambling companies, I forget which one, sponsored these wooden desks I don't know if they're wooden, probably plastic for the weight, that learners could carry on their back, so they could carry it to and from school, have it at school and have it at home, and they were branded, and there was this whole outcry about why they branded. Remember that, yeah. So they're basically plastering society with their money, with people that we need, but in exchange, what's the payoff? It's unconscionable.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, what is the job of the National Gambling Board? I ask this because, how do I phrase this? To my mind, based on what I'm reading on this and what you and I are talking about, and also what I see in many other industries, in the media space as well, in journalism, in how newsrooms are run. So this is a universal problem, that industry often evolves faster than the regulation that should go with it.
Of course.
And we need rules that are fit for this digital age. And I don't know who must initiate that. I mean, somebody asked me a question about podcasting. There was a group of very weak men just sitting and being disrespectful to a broadcaster who's earned his stripes, Anele Mdoda and Kanye Domo, talking about how they were nobodies, they couldn't have made it without this and this. And it started a whole conversation around the Broadcasting Complaints Directorate, that on radio, on broadcasting platforms, you have to adhere, and people have means for recourse if you offend and do harm. But in podcasting, people can just switch on the camera and just talk. There's no regulatory environment. So I'm just using that as well to just think through how it applies in other industries. The technology is so fast, but the regulation is not
slow,
developing at that pace. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can see that. You got there was mention in the Sunday Times article yesterday about the advertising regulatory board. They've got it busy trying to develop a code, because I think that's the one thing I think that really needs urgent attention, is that there needs to be some regulation around their ads in some way. I mean, just the tone, the content, the pace. We have to. I don't know if it's possible if the ARB could have that kind of reach. But for me, I don't know. It should be tempered with even those weight loss ads. Below it says, when used in conjunction with a kilojoule controlled diet and exercise or whatever. But I mean, there should be, your chance of winning is actually bloody minuscule or whatever. It just seems that they're a runaway horse. Everyone's just left in their dust. And this thing is galloping, and these profits and these profits on the part of the companies, staggering losses on behalf of ordinary people. A lot of industries now reliant on their revenue. It's just a perfect storm of disaster. Everything is lagging. They've taken the bit between their teeth to keep the analogy going, and they just off. And they've got such a head start now. Gosh, I really am warming to my theme. They've got such a head start now that I just don't know what it's going to take to rein this in.
Change is daunting, challenging, disorientating, unstoppable. Change is inevitable. Change is wise. Change is action. It's liberating, rewarding. Change is brave. Change is opportunity. We're always ready to invest in it. 91. Investing for a world of change.
Too many people, from government to media to sports to whatever, are reliant on their income now. So that's also stifling. And this is where we've got Redi, and it's quite scary because government likes that revenue a lot. That tax is fantastic. Media is benefiting at the expense of what? Ordinary people with this terrible addiction that's ruining lives everywhere. There's nothing else I can really say. That's where we're at.
Yeah, obviously you don't want to create draconian laws, especially ones that would inadvertently discriminate against the poor. You can't be living in a world or country where you say, those of you who have money, you can do whatever you want with your money, even if it's gambling, but those who don't have money don't gamble. Of course, logic says if you don't have money, don't go and throw it away by gambling. But we don't live in a world where
we can't.
Different, yeah. So it's, I don't know. I just feel that societies that are uniquely affected by inequality, unemployment, despair, poverty, there is a moral duty, imperative. I suppose I don't have the answers, but I just thought that I should cast a spotlight on this and make an appeal. We've got to do the right thing. We've got to be aware of the vulnerabilities, the pressure points, and we've got to be aware of the impact, the harm that this is doing to our society, and hopefully start a level of education, which I hope this is, awareness, which I hope this is, but ultimately some agitation for a more positive, I don't know if that's possible, and a regulatory environment on this.
Absolutely. That the banks and government, coupled with severe restrictions and controls on advertising, that would go a long way, I think. But if you're dealing with a populace, a good percentage of which, well, over half are gambling in some way, but I mean, I buy a lot of ticket every now and then, that's my extent, but I'm still gambling. But those people that are now chronically addicted, how do you, well, they are, I mean, some of the money that the gambling companies have to pay to the regulatory board, that goes to providing psychiatric services, counseling, whatever, for people, that gambling helpline. They've spent a lot more money than they used to capacitating the call lines, because the calls have just gone, have increased hugely. So all those things together, but I don't think right now, well, I know right now, there's nothing happening. We don't have a bill. We don't have advertising restrictions. We don't have the banks offering blocks that you can impose on yourself. None of that is there right now. And what's happening, as we've seen, is the spend is just doing this. That's where we
Yeah.
are right now. I hope if we have a chance to chat in a couple of years from now, that will have changed, really. But that's the stark reality. And I think we need to really, as a society, start talking about it and acknowledging what's going on and the impact that it's having. So that, we can't say we didn't know. We have to know.
Indeed. Indeed. So, folks, that's it. I don't like doing a podcast or any conversation where I just whine and there are no solutions. I think there were some suggested solutions: public awareness, financial literacy, pressure on businesses to be responsible, and most importantly, for a country of ours to have a regulatory environment that speaks to the problem. It is very clear that gambling has gone beyond just mere entertainment for so many in our society, but it is seen as an income stream. And all those people whose names are coming up at the Mazanga Commission, people who've stolen, people who are hijacking the state, looting, you are contributing to this vulnerability and breakdown in society, so that so many people are left on the periphery. They are left in the abyss where life and death decisions can be made over what to do with this last 50 Rand note that I have. Wendy, that's where I want to leave it. I don't know if you've got a final message, a word of warning, what consumers must look out for. I always loved your how you sign off. Look out for this, look out for that. I don't know if you can do that now.
Well, on this one, no. I think what I want to say, one of the things I want to say is, parents, have this chat with your children. Have the chat with, you might be thinking you're betting on your team and using all your sus and your know-how, but you're gambling, and this is what it leads to. Our poor kids, they must hear us talking about vaping, they must hear us talking about drugs, but this is something newish and viral and very, very, very dangerous. So I would say that is an area you're sort of mid-teens. If you could start having that conversation, I think the schools should be starting to talk, getting experts in to come and talk about what this is actually and where it leads and the realities around it. I think that would be a good place to start, something you could do before it's too late.
Wendy Knowler, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time on the Readiness Report.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Redi.
Thank you. All right, on that not so cheerful note, thank you for watching and listening to the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick. Thank you.